Today's episode focuses on one of the most major deep-sea accidents ever to have occurred. The Byford Dolphin was a semi-submersible, column-stabilized drilling rig operated by Dolphin Drilling, a Fred Olsen Energy subsidiary. Registered in Hamilton, Bermuda, the rig drilled for multiple companies over the years, within the likes of the British, Danish, and Norwegian sectors of the North Sea, but was known for encountering various incidents during its operation. In 2019, Dolphin scrapped the rig, something which many consider to have been long overdue, especially after an incident which occurred 36 years prior. On November 5, 1983, 4 saturation divers died under gruesome circumstances whilst aboard the now infamous structure. Those killed in the event included British divers Edwin Arthur Coward and Roy Lucas, as well as Norwegian nationals Bjørn Bergersen and Truls Hellevik. They were assisted on deck by dive tenders William Crammond, who was also killed, and Martin Saunders, who managed to survive the ordeal, albeit with serious injuries. So, what happened that day? Who was responsible? And what lessons were learned? Join us as we dive into the horror that was the Byford Incident. Before we examine the incident as it occurred, we must first go back to the beginning in order to understand the scale, mechanics, and background of the rig and its purpose. Designed by the Norwegian drilling rig company Aker, the Byford Dolphin was built as a deep-sea driller and was considered first of class in the highly successful Aker H3 series. It was completed at the Verdal shipyard in 1974 and deemed functional for operations thereafter. However, 2 years into its tenure, on March 1, 1976, the rig ran aground during its transit from a block in the North Sea to Bergen. 6 people died after falling from their bunks, whilst the rest of the crew had to be evacuated. Despite this early shock and tragic event, the Dolphin would continue to operate as a drilling rig, as it was equipped with advanced penetrative equipment and met the standard levels of certification under Norwegian laws. Structurally, the spec of the rig consisted of an overall length of 355 feet, with a maximum breadth of 221 feet and depth of 120 feet. Its capabilities were impressive, as it was able to function at a water depth of over 1,500 feet and had a drilling depth capacity of 38 miles. Additionally, the complex was able to navigate using its own engines for small-scale assignments, though specially designed tugboats were required for long-distance activities. The rig employed professional saturation divers, who were able to dive up to a depth of nearly 500 feet. This dangerous job involves the manual servicing of equipment to offshore oil rigs and deep-sea pipelines. Supportive job roles, which are critical to diver safety, are known as tenders. These workers assist in retracting and unspooling the thick air supply tube lines and communication wires that link their fellow divers to the surface. Though divers are well compensated and paid for their efforts, most of which may be underwater for more than 24 hours before resurfacing, the risks and condensed pressure are extremely high. Being exposed to the harsh conditions can lead to decompression sickness, which maritime protocols have been trying to protect them against for years. The disorder, also known as the bends, occurs if a diver moves from high-pressure conditions to low-pressure areas. Molecules of nitrogen dissolve under pressure, quickly grow, and turn gaseous. From there, bubbles of nitrogen may form in the bloodstream and disrupt the diver's circulation, becoming very painful and potentially fatal. Decompression sickness is known to increase muscle and joint pain, as well as paralysis, delirium, stroke, and cardiac arrests. Therefore, safety precautions are paramount. Slowly ascending to low depths and regular breaks are just some of the ways to allow the body to naturally exude nitrogen. So, Now that we have a bit of background and understanding of the column-stabilized and semi-submersible oil rig and those who operated within it, let us now delve into the incident itself and to the horrifying events that ensued. It all began on November 5th, 1983, when William Crammond, a knowledgeable and accomplished tender, was conducting a set of routine procedures upon the rig, which had 2 pressurized living quarters housing 2 divers inside each. Crammond linked the diving bell to both chambers. Normally, the bell would not get unlinked from the quarters until the doors were securely closed and sealed. Unfortunately, it disconnected before the door shut, leading to a volatile decompression explosion as the air pressure inside the chambers rapidly changed from 9 atmospheres down to 1 atmosphere. The hazardous air blitz resulted in the diving bell being pushed away and the death of Crammond. His colleague and fellow tender, Martin Saunders, barely survived. With everything happening so fast, the 4 men within the chambers would not know what was about to happen to them, nor would they have time to attempt escape. Edwin Arthur Coward, Roy Lucas, Bjørn Bergersen, and Truls Hellevik's autopsy records would state that at least 3 of the men were boiled from the inside, as the nitrogen inside their blood burst into gas bubbles. The grim report would continue by detailing the horrifying and hideous death of the final diver, who was stationed at one of the chamber doors. According to the information released in the report, the victim had been sucked out of the vessel, resulting in his whole body being torn into pieces, and his internal organs shooting up and onto the rig's main deck. Despite these men being seasoned divers, tenders, and experts in their field, no one could have ever imagined the gruesome horror that befell them on that day. As with any major incident, a thorough investigation, examination report, and assessment of claims would follow the catastrophic accident and would lead to the formation of the North Sea Divers Alliance. The coalition lobbies for the protection of North Sea divers was created in partnership with the relatives of all 6 victims of the Byford Dolphin incident. The group would file a lawsuit against Dolphin Energy, citing the lack of safety equipment on board the rig and questioning whether the cause truly was human error. Brian McGlinchey, a retired diving manager at the International Marine Contractors Association, or IMCA, joined the sector the same year as the incident. His portfolio was extensive in the industry, having worked for multiple diving contractors in the Middle East, India, North Sea, and West Africa. He would later become employed at the Health and Safety Executive as an inspector and finish his career at IMCA. McGlinchey states that the Dolphin incident was, quote, a huge impact to lose 5 men in one explosive decompression incident and for the other tender to be so badly injured. It was massive. He went on to explain that, quote, what it did was really underline the potential in saturation diving for a single major accident to cause multiple fatalities. The conclusion to the occurrence was attributed to miscommunication, sloppy routine timelines, and fatigue, blaming the crew for having worked more than 12 hours in one shift. However, McGlinchey also points out that the equipment used on the Byford Dolphin was not outfitted with modernized fail-safe functionality, as the mechanics, including the vital interlocking mechanisms, dated back as far as 1975, and ultimately prevented the trunk from being opened while under pressure. The former IMCA expert stated, quote, the fact that there was no interlock on the locking mechanism was immediately apparent. He continues that, quote, the accident brought home to everybody that the transfer under pressure, or TUP, between the bell and the chamber complex on the surface, that is a critically high-risk part of the operation that you've got to get right every time. Typically, and perhaps most frustratingly, was the fact that a Norwegian ruling by governing bodies which required interlock mechanisms and all bell systems was in the process of coming to fruition and being passed before the incident in 1983. However, the ruling had to still be finalized and rolled out across all sectors and equipment, Just 1 month after the accident, the ruling was completed and deemed final across the board. As one can imagine, the pain, the heartache, and stress of losing their loved ones in the accident would have been hard enough. The fact that the relatives of the deceased received no compensation or support, both emotionally or financially, is even more distressing. Claims that the men's actions and supposedly insufficient handling of their tasks was somehow responsible for the tragedy invoked severe feelings of guilt, distress, and dismay amongst the grieving families. McGlinchey commented on the processes and attribution of blame in an interview where he stated the following: "What the health and safety executive does in this country is it doesn't look to blame individuals. We've all made mistakes. Human error, we are all prone to it." He goes on to clarify his compassionate stance and, quote, "to consider the human being in the system and not put those persons in a position where an understandable human error could lead to very serious consequences. Our safety systems must be designed to be tolerant of human error." It was clear that Mr. McGlinchey was sympathetic to the victims and their families, and that addressing the failures of the equipment used in the rig is an important part of the process, especially when one is addressing or apportioning blame. For assessment purposes, ALARP, or as low as reasonably practicable, is interpreted as the reduction of risk to the lowest possible level, bearing in mind the benefits flowing from the acceptance of the risk and taking into account the cost of further reducing the risk. Safety guidance structures are paramount in acknowledging latent failures in systems to ensure any and all dangers are controlled to such standards. This governing platform is something that modern offshore diving legislation and IMCA guidance publicly recognizes. The absence of a suitable interlock on the Byford Dolphin diving system was a massive and obvious latent failure, and has since been considered the main cause of the incident itself. McGlinchey reiterated that, when the clamp was opened and was still under pressure, that could have happened to anyone in the absence of an interlock, and that blaming individuals is not the way to improve safety. Luckily for the families of those killed and injured in the Byford Dolphin incident, as well as families of those killed in several other incidents who united against the authorities, a settlement was agreed in 2009, following legal action via the North Sea Divers Alliance. Meanwhile, the Byford rig itself remained in operation until it was finally scrapped in 2019. The Cullen Report, which refers to one of 3 reports of public inquiries into UK disasters that were overseen by William Cullen, Baron Cullen of Whitekirk, was first produced after the Occidental Petroleum's Piper Alpha disaster on July 6, 1988. The incident, which involved a gas condensate ignition that killed 167 of the 229 people on board the oil platform, all within a space of 22 minutes, was overseen by Cullen. In his summary, he recommended the preparation of safety cases that included diving operations in reference to high-profile diving accidents. From a general and perhaps more emotional standpoint, a bid is currently underway to create an Aberdeen Memorial in the city of Aberdeen in Scotland, which pays tribute to the North Sea divers who lost their lives over the last 50 years. Former saturation divers Nick McClellan and James McLean have commissioned Alan Beatty Harriott to create the design. Harriott also produced the Robert the Bruce sculpture outside Aberdeen's Marshall College. It is believed that 79 divers have died whilst working in the North Sea oil and gas sector since 1966, something that must surely be recognized, although an estimated cost of €120,000 is what is required to create the memorial. Both McClellan and McLean have lost close friends and colleagues over the years. Mr. McLean, one of the project's architects, stated the following: "I think it is important for people to have a memorial like that where they can go and reflect and remember those individuals, loved ones, husbands, brothers, fathers. The offshore North Sea wouldn't have happened without all sorts of people helicopter pilots, riggers, cooks, but particularly divers, who played an important role in being able to take advantage of the resources that we've had over the last 5 decades. It goes without saying that saturation diving is a highly dangerous job, a role that only a select few can handle and carry out constructively. We live in a world where some say that preliminary checks, notice boards, and hazardous reporting is health and safety gone mad. However, when one looks at the events that took place back in 1983, we must surely understand the requirement for such thorough research and scrutiny. For those men who lost their lives in the Byford Dolphin incident, their health and their safety was undermined and ultimately led to their demise. Let us hope that their deaths were not in vain, as many more divers tackle the unforgiving waters of the North Sea and put their lives in the hands of more robust equipment, as well as their fellow man.